Welcome him back, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris, and I am an alcoholic. This has really been a great event. I love the events that that are only a couple hours away that you can drive to, and I've had a really good time. The committee and everything. What a wonderful location too for something like this. All right, so it's my job just to cover steps 8 and 9, and I just want to quickly put those steps into context. The way I see them today. This isn't the way you have to see them. It's just the way I see them today. I see step 1 as the problem. The problem, the alcoholism, step 1. I can't stay away from alcohol on my own, and I can't control it when I'm drinking it, and everything in life sucks. That's step 1. Well, welcome to AA. And I need to really understand that at a deep level. Because I got to tell you, there are people who will say they understand it, but they don't follow that up with any action. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and you'll get somebody that shows up in the beginner's meeting and is looking for a sponsor, and they're like, "Oh, my life is terrible. You wouldn't believe it. My parents are throwing me out. The cops are after me. I got no money. My family hates me. I want help. I want help." And so I'm, okay. You're alcoholic and your life is unmanageable, and I explain a little bit about that. And then I say, the solution for that is a spiritual course of action. Some spiritual exercises that will really change you internally and spiritually to the point where you'll be able to recover from alcoholism. And the way I do it is I bring somebody over to my house, and we sit down with the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And we start going through it. So how about coming over to my house Friday? Oh, Friday, man. Friday's no good. Friday's bingo night. I haven't missed bingo until, it's like, so that's happened over and over again in 20 different manifestations with me, right? So it's very, very hard. There's a line in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions that says, "Who among us wishes to admit complete defeat?" Glass in hand, we've warped our minds to such a state that we're blowing up everything in our life. I think that's a direct quote. So who among us wants to admit that kind of defeat? And then a spiritual solution, we have two alternatives. One is to go on the way we've been going, drinking ourselves into oblivion, and the other is to accept spiritual help. And neither one of those alternatives are really attractive to us when we show up in here, I'm going to die an alcoholic death. Could you give me more information on that, before I accept spiritual help? So it's a tough lift. But if you've been beat up enough, you're ready to concede that. Step 2 is coming to believe that there's a solution. The first way I did that was I saw you recovering. Step 3 is making a decision to engage in this, to do my job here, to find out what is appropriate and what is required in Alcoholics Anonymous, and be willing to do that. And in step 4, I look over the things that have been blocking me from spirituality, blocking me from a connection to God, blocking me from all those things. And the number one thing is resentment. And then they talk about fear, which really was more like anxiety with me. And then they talk about conduct. Hey, Chris, how's your conduct been? And I need to review all this stuff because I need to know what the problem is. I've been in the business environment for a long time, And what they'll do is they'll do root cause analysis, or if there's a problem, like the manufacturing is slowed down, or there's a high turnover rate in employees, or whatever, right? Someone will do a root cause analysis, and they'll get down to like what's really the problem here. So, and if you have an accurate assessment of what the problem is, you know, you can get about the business of the solution. And so step 4 is absolutely pointing all this stuff at me. I'm filled with resentment. I'm filled with fear. And my conduct is terrible because I'm managing my own life. And then I need to share this. I need to share this information. The stuff that I discover, I need to share it with another person in a very honest way. And a lot of times, that's the first time we've really been honest with somebody. You know, it says in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of us live like a double life. You know, we put on a facade. The type of facade we want to think other people see us as. Because there's something deeply flawed within us. You know, we're not okay just showing up the way we are. We've got to be a chameleon. You know, we've got to act the way we think people will respect us or like us or whatever. And so I know when I went out and did my first 5th step, it was the first time I was ever honest at that level with another man, and it was transformational for me. It was transformational for me. And then, you know, everybody's been doing such a good job here with their experience on the steps. You know, the next thing is step 6. You know, I've identified a lot of the root cause of my alcoholism and my disturbance and the lack of quality in my life. I've discovered this stuff with this inventory. It's the first time I've ever really been self-searching. And it's the first time I've ever shared this stuff with somebody. There's no better place to be, you know, for becoming willing to have these defects of character removed than that set of exercises. You know, right after the 5th step is a beautiful time to be willing to have these things that we've found objectionable removed. And then there's some prayer work. There's some prayer work to be done for the removal of these character defects. Now, you know, I thought for sure that steps 6 and 7 were almost irresponsible when I first looked at them, right? Oh God, here, I'm turning it over to you. You know, you can have all this. You can have my debt. You know, you can, you know, but that's not really what this step is about. So why do I go to God with these defects of character? Just like Peter said, I go to God because there's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go. Haven't you tried? You know, oh, I know, I always do this, and I know I've promised you I'm never going to do this again. You know, I'm sorry. You know, haven't you tried with these character defects? My belief today they're bigger than me. Certainly, there's a responsibility for me to be willing to have them removed and to take appropriate action for their removal. But if I could just read a self-help book or something, you know, I would. Yeah. So I'll tell you a quick story. Fish Food Phil, my sponsor, shows up at my house one day. It's the first time he ever just showed up unannounced. I'm like, uh-oh, what's going on? He was just coming over to say hi. And I take him up to my room, and I've always been a big reader. When I was drinking, it was more science fiction than anything else. But I've always been a big reader. And he comes up, and he's looking through my books, and he's like, Chris, man, I'm surprised. You've got a lot of self-help books here, you know, and I'm like, yep, kind of proud, right? And he goes, can I ask you a question? I go, sure, Phil. He goes, where's your help others books? And I'm like, Phil, I'm unfamiliar with that category. Where would you find those in the Borders bookstore? And what he was trying to tell me is, if me working on self would have worked, it would have worked. I'm up against alcoholism. I don't need a mere tune-up. It says in our book that we need an overhaul. So when looking at this stuff, I've got to understand what I'm up against. Now, as I ask God to remove these character defects in an attitude of humility, as I ask God to remove them, I move in to step 8, which is putting a list together of the people and the institutions that my character defects have harmed. So the best possible spiritual atmosphere you can be in to participate in what you need to participate in for the removal of your character defects is to make a list of the people and institutions that those character defects have harmed and become willing to make amends to those defects of character, to those people and institutions that your defects of character have harmed. I want to tell a story that kind of illustrates this. It's just a good example of what I'm talking about. So I sponsored this guy in the late '90s, and man, he was a rough dude. He came from an area in a city in New Jersey that was just a rough area. And he ended up in our town. He came out of a blackout owning a horse farm in our town. You know how that happens. And he started coming to the AA meetings, and he got sober, and he started coming to the AA meetings in our area. And this guy was truly in a lot of trouble. He had been doing massive amounts of Percocet on top of alcohol, and when he finally showed up at the rooms, it was going to take a long time for him to be able to talk. I mean, they'd go around the room and everybody would introduce themselves, and he'd go like, it took him a while to talk. And when he finally started talking, he aimed for me and asked me to sponsor him. I had some of the crazy guys back then. I'm always wondering why that was. But so we're going to meetings together. We're doing a bunch of stuff, and we're going through the steps. And he's doing his job with the steps. I got to tell you, we claim progress, not perfection. So I'm really okay with someone if I'm convinced they're really trying. You know what I mean? Because there's just people that are only capable of what they're capable of at that specific time. But anyway, we're going through the step work, and we're going to a meeting together. And we knew who the coffee maker was, so we were stopping at a convenience store to get a coffee before the meeting. And we're getting coffee, and I pay for my coffee. He's behind me, kind of, and we're walking out. And as he's walking out, I see him do this. Grabs a pack of cigarettes, has it in his coat so fast it was hard to see, and then we're out the door. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I go, did you just steal a pack of cigarettes? And he goes, no. I go, let me phrase this differently. Did you take a pack of cigarettes without paying for it? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, then you took a pack of you stole a pack of cigarettes. He's like, no, it's from the rack in the front. And I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, the rack in the front, you're a chump if you don't take something off the rack in the front. They budget for that. And I'm like, sponsorship summit. We're working a spiritual program. All right. And we have a meeting that night instead of going to the meeting, and we go over all this stuff. And I explained to him, what our way of life is. So I want to tell you what he did. He put a list of every store he ever could remember stealing from. He put envelopes together of the amount of money he considered, those thefts were worth. And he went back to about 20 stores. And, he would ask for the manager, and he would do his job with step 9. I need to tell you that I stole money from here, and, I'm here to set things right, and, I've got the amount of money, and I just, is there anything else I can do, to set this right? He did his job in a very, very imperfect way, but the money was there, right? And he went and he knocked out all of these amends. Now, the question I'll ask you is, do you think he still steals cigarettes? Not a chance. So there's a connection. There's a connection with making amends and the removal of the defects of character. I think we're making a demonstration. I think we're making a demonstration to God that we're serious about this stuff. When it's almost devotional to go out and make amends. You know what I mean? And now, it's been a long time since I've done a 9th step amends. It hasn't been a long time since I've done a 10th step, but I've got some experience, and I've got some experience with this stuff. And I'll tell you that 99 times out of 100, it's been a great experience for me. But there's something deep inside me that wants to tell me it's going to be bad if I do it. You understand what I'm saying? Like I know that I need to meet with Aunt Fanny and tell her I stole all her jewelry, for drugs. But that's going to be really bad if I do that. That's just an example, but there's something inherent within me that makes me balk at these particular steps. And I've got to tell you, that has to be overcome. It has to be overcome. And my experience was I was inspired by some people who were militant about the 12 steps. I know Jimmy and Peter, knew these guys. And I started to get a hold of a number of workshops back in the 90s by Mark and Joe, Mark Houston and Joe Hawk. And for years, I went through these workshops. I had a job where you could wear a Walkman and do your job. There's no issue. And I went through these workshops, and what they did was they convinced me it was the right thing to do. And then came the willingness part. And I would like to tell you that I immediately became willing to do a lot of these things. But it was more of an organic process. I started with the easy ones, and I moved into the more difficult ones. And I'm eternally grateful for these people who cut no slack. You know what I mean? Because if I would have gone into a discussion meeting or a meeting in my area and raised my hand and said, I'm going back to such and such a place to make such and such an amends, and 5 people out of 6 would have told me I didn't have to do it. It wouldn't be a smart thing to do. But I got hooked in with these people that would tell me it's essential to do. And I'm really, really glad I did, because what my experience has been with the 9th step, the 8th and the 9th step, is it added power to my recovery. It added muscle to my recovery. I was solid in, after these amends were done. And it added an amazing amount of freedom in my life, too. I felt free enough to be anywhere doing anything. And if you remember me sharing about the anxiety I had, the anxiety that I was talking about in step one, always being uncomfortable where I was doing what I was doing. I really think step 8 and 9, at least for me, is what changed all that. It changed all that. For millions of years, I lived on a dead-end street, last house on a dead-end street. And almost all my drinking was wrapped around that house in that town. And I remember just feeling uncomfortable walking up that street because I was a blackout drinker. And every once in a while, someone would, be really mad about something I didn't remember. And there was, there was a lot of harm that I had done in that town, and a lot of people that if I saw them walking this way, I'd walk to the other side of the road. I wouldn't want to face them. And all that stuff was erased, after step 8 and 9, because I was told I need to complete my amends. Now, some of them you can't finish, right? People are you can't find them, or you can't remember who they are. But there's a demonstration and then there's an exercise that you can do to do the best you can with those particular steps. Now, in step 9, it gives us real specific instructions. It tells us if we've committed a crime, what we're supposed to do. And it says, we must be willing to make amends for these crimes, as long as it doesn't involve other people or hurt other people. And that's the qualification for that criminal amends. I made a bunch of those. Then there's the person we hate. All right, those were kind of tough for me because I still had some resentment to a number of people. But it says in the book that we take the bit in our teeth and we go to the person we hate, confessing our former ill will, sharing with them our complete desire to change the type of person we are and set right the wrong. Now, I did a bunch of those, and those were incredibly impactful, and they were the hardest ones for me, And then there's some relationship amends. There's the stepping out on the missus amends or the hubby, and it explains in there how those are supposed to be handled. And it's really, really interesting that there's some serious qualifications in those particular amends. You're not to involve anybody else except the person you're making the amends to. You're supposed to really be sure you're not causing more harm than good by making this amends. And so there's some serious qualifications in there. Should we tell them if they don't know? Not always, it says. All right, so they do cut you some slack in there, but the slack they cut you is so that you don't cause more harm. I'll tell you a story. About a guy I was working with. And this was a period of time in the 90s when I was working with way too many people. There were people over my house every night, going through the steps. I would never be that irresponsible again. Because I was losing track of where people were, and what step are you on? It was just crazy. But this guy was working the steps with me, and he got through step 4, and before he even did step 5, he went to make amends to his wife. And he was running a telecommunication company up until I think he lost the job, and that's why he came into AA. But he was a bigwig CEO in a company, and it came out in his inventory that he'd had some affairs. It was on the sex conduct inventory. So what he does is he sits down with his wife, and he admits the three affairs. Let me tell you what happened next. She beat the shit out of him. That's what she did. He almost lost an eye, this guy. Because she was kicking him in the head while he was down. She was mad. And the worst part was, she absolutely demanded to know who the three women were and got in contact with them and their husbands and put a lawsuit. I'm like, what did you do? You made it so much worse. You know, so the qualifications in this particular 8th step really is important, you know, to follow, because all of these amends, we need to be conscious of the fact that that other people can be involved, other people can be hurt, and that's really the only, you know, the only get out of jail free card in the amends. If it's going to be difficult, too bad. If the person is in Australia, get a ticket. You know, that's the sponsorship that I came from, and that's really all I can do, all I can share with you. Knock them out, because the freedom and the power that you get from these amends it's worth every penny of inconvenience that they're gonna cause you. Or, you know, another guy. Here's a financial amends story. Another guy I sponsored. He owned a mortgage business. This is like about 1997. He owned a mortgage business, and when he came in and we got to the 9th step, he had a list, man. This guy caused some trouble. You know, he pillaged, and he put all the cards together, all the amends cards, and he was really hesitant to do any of this because he didn't have a lot of money, right? I mean, the company was struggling a little bit, and he didn't have a lot of money. But he became willing to start to do this. And the first amends he does is, back when he was younger, he stole a lawnmower from a church and sold it for drugs. So he puts this amends card together, and the first amends he does is he goes to the church and he asks to see the reverend, and he does his amends with the reverend, and he's got some money. And the reverend takes the money, and when he asks the question, is there anything else I can do, you know, to set right this wrong? The reverend goes, yeah, I want you to write a letter. I want you to explain what you just did. I want you to put it in writing. And so he does. He puts this letter together, and he lets me read it before he gives it to the guy. And it was really, really well done. And what he did was he went back and he gave this letter to the pastor of the church. Pastor thanked him, and you know, he went on his way. And what happened the next Sunday was the pastor read that letter to his congregation, and his sermon was on redemption. You know what I mean? Like this redemption is possible. It's really possible for us. We can do our utmost to set right the wrongs, and what'll happen is we'll be in the sunlight of the Spirit that my two buddies were talking about. We'll be in the spiritual life. Will not be a theory. It will be something that we'll be living. And we'll start to understand what being recovered from alcoholism is. We will not be staying sober one day at a time. We will be recovered from alcoholism, which means we need to live a spiritual life one day at a time. And the drink problem will disappear. We will be released from alcohol, from the obsession to put alcohol in our body. And I believe that happens in step 9. You know, we're all really familiar with the 12 promises, they call them, right? What I'd like to say about the 12 promises is, if you're asked to read them in a meeting or something like that, please call them by their correct title. They're the 9-step promises. Because sometimes when they're read, you'll get somebody who's just showing up in AA and they're wondering why those promises aren't coming true. They've gone to 4 meetings. You know what I mean? So put them in their proper context. If we're painstaking about this process of development, so what process of development are they talking about? I think they're specifically talking about step 9. We need to be painstaking and thorough. But there's a lot of steps before 9 that we also have to be painstaking about. We'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We'll know a new freedom and a new happiness. So I really believe Alcoholics Anonymous is about 2 main things: power and freedom. And the power is the power that works in us and through us and does for us what we cannot do for ourselves, the spiritual power. And the freedom is the freedom from the bondage of self. But what this whole set of steps are about, it's about connection to God. It's about really refining our connection to God. So one of my favorite definitions of spirituality is this. One time I was asked to give a talk on spirituality, so I did what you would do. I went to the Google, and I tried to find some definitions at least on it. And my favorite definition of spirituality is this. Spirituality is a personal inner pathway to connection with the divine. You know what the 12 steps are? They're a personal inner pathway to connection with the divine. My relationship and my unity with and my connection to God has been the in between me and God is 1,000 pieces of junk that I've put there living life on self-will. There's logs and rocks and everything in between me and a healthy relationship with this power greater than myself. This power greater than myself has loved me the whole time and been there. You know, I'm the one that caused all the disunity, and it's really on me that there was a distance from connection to this divine, because I think we're born with it. I think we're born with it. And so these steps are all about making the path clear. I'll describe it in a couple of ways. So let's say you've got a big sycamore tree in your yard. Those are the ones with the leaves that are this big. And no grass is growing underneath the tree. And you really want grass underneath the tree, right? Well, you get somebody in there and say, you got to prune the tree. You know, you got to cut back the tree. So somebody will come in, they'll cut back the tree so some sunlight can get in, and all of a sudden some grass can grow, right? Well, we've got so much stuff in the way of the sunlight of the Spirit that we're not in communion or connection with that Spirit. And so a lot of this step work is pruning back those branches. I also believe that as alcoholics, this is what I believe. I believe we are unresolved mystics. Let me explain what I mean by that, okay? Now, a mystic is someone who wants to go deep in. They want to go, they're the ones that are in the caves in the Himalayas meditating 19 hours a day. They're the ones that go to the silent retreats, every single, and they go to Gethsemane and they're really, really devout, serious practices. They throw robes on and, join monasteries. They're the mystics. They're going all the way in because they seek they seek at an incredibly deep level a connection with the divine, a connection with God. That's what makes them mystics. They are driven. And I think what we have as alcoholics is I believe we've got a spiritual vacancy. Peter was talking about sprees, right? I've got a spiritual vacancy. I just don't feel right. I don't feel okay. There's something missing. And the mistake I'm making is to try to take material things and to gain material things that will fill a spiritual vacancy. I'll do it with food. I'll do it with sex. I'll do it with toys. If I could only get the 2024 vet, with the special suspect, that'll make me happy. I had a running joke with a good friend of mine in Texas that we just lost recently. God bless him. He'd call me up every once in a while. And this is an example of one of his calls. Hey, Chris, I just got the new Humvee with every bell and whistle. You got to see this thing. It's unbelievable. And I'd go, yeah, that sounds really cool. And he goes, and then he'd say, that wasn't it either. You know what I mean? Like how long is it going to last to make you feel whole? To make you feel whole. So we're using drugs, we're using alcohol, and we're trying to fill this spiritual vacancy. And the 12 steps are an interpersonal pathway to connection with the divine. They're perfect for us. They're perfect for us. I got to buy that. I got to buy that. I won't be happy if I don't have that. I haven't done that in a long time. I still buy stupid stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm not driven. I'm not driven by the acquisition of certain external things, because I know what I know deep inside. I need to have connection to the divine. Now, here's another illustration of what I believe. It's another story that I use to describe kind of what our journey is, right? So Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden one day, and they're having a blast. I mean, everything they could possibly need is right there. They're having a blast, and for one reason or another, they become convinced that they really should eat an apple from a tree that God told them they shouldn't. Everything is. All of a sudden, they're self-centered, and all of a sudden they've got to cover themselves, and God shows up, and He knows right away what happened. Okay, hey, did you eat from that apple? No, you ate from that apple. Well, she made me do it. And so God is like, okay. I love you enough that it looks like you want self. You want self-centeredness. You want self-determination. So I'm going to give you that, because I really love you. I'm going to give you that. But you got to get out of paradise. You got to go east of Eden to the land of Nod. Anybody in here been to the land of Nod? I'll tell you, that's where I was every single night. I'd pass out in my chair and come to on the floor. Now what the step work does, this step work is about turning back in that selfishness and that self-consciousness and that self-determination. We're making a demonstration to turn that back in. And when we do that, I'm telling you, we go back to paradise. Life is so worth living today for me and many of the people that I've worked with over the years. We've journeyed in this thing called 12-step recovery. We've journeyed and we've gotten to a point where the quality of life is truly, truly amazing. And Another lie people used to tell me when I was younger. Did anybody ever tell you this? A tiger doesn't change their stripes. You know, once somebody's a jerk, they're always a jerk. I mean, I heard that stuff all the time. Well, I've seen incredible transformations. I'll tell you about one amends I did. This was an amends I did where I actually got kicked out of the office. It says they may throw you out of the office, right? I got kicked out of the office. So my last 2 years of drinking, I was an electrician working for an electrical contractor. And listen, I was not a good electrician by any means. I didn't, it was too much of a to-do to learn codes, and things like that. So I just wing it, and cause a lot of fires. And I made my boss look bad on multiple occasions, especially when I got drunk on the job. That was really bad. So this particular guy was a normal drinker, a recreational drinker, a normal drinker. You ever drink with people like that? It's annoying. So we would get back to the shop, and he would have a case of beer there for all of us. And everyone would have 2 beers, including me. You ever have 2 beers and then go home to dinner? I never did, I would have those 2 beers and stop at the liquor store, on the way home because I got the motor running. And if I stuck around too long, I would do something tragically embarrassing. And when I'd get him really pissed off. So I owed this guy a ton of amends. So I'm sober a little while, and I show up at his office. His business was in the town I lived in. And I walked in there, and he's like, "You, what are you doing here?" And I start to try to tell him, and he's like, "I don't got time for this. I don't got time. I'm really busy. Get out of here. Some other time." So I left. I gave it a couple more months, and I go in and I try it again. The same thing. What? What? I don't understand why you're here. Get out of here. And so it's the second time. Now I'm okay now. I've made 2 approaches, 2 attempts. The book says, it's water over the dam at this point in time, right? I've done my demonstration, and I'm going to be okay. It's okay for him not to want to see me when I'm making amends. That's okay. I have to try, but it's not all on me. It's not all about me. So I go on about my business. About 6 months later, I go to the barbershop to get my hair cut. And I walk in, and who's sitting there waiting to get his hair cut? My old boss. So I go over and I sit down right next to him. He can't get away now. And I do my thing, I broach the subject, and I explain where I am, what I'm doing. I explain a little bit about how I really need to set right, some wrongs that I caused in the past. And I understand I caused a lot of wrongs with you, and I was able to get that out. And he was finally real generous with his response on that. So generous, in fact, that a couple of years later, I was running the facilities for a school system, and I hired him as my electrical contractor. I mean, I'm just looking back at the type of person I was, how I behaved, how I interacted with the world was so devastatingly sick. Looking back at it from this point of view, that I had to do something. I had to do something right. Here's another thing that I believe, and I don't expect anybody else in this room to believe it, but I believe it. I believe that all the harm that I caused out there drinking, I am not responsible for. Now think about it this way, okay? I am powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless. I can't not drink. I'm being driven by 100 forms of fear, resentment, self-centeredness. I'm being driven by these character defects that are also larger than me. How can I be responsible for that then? It's an illness. Here's the magic in Alcoholics Anonymous. I need to be accountable. I need to be accountable for all of it. I need to make amends for all of it as if I was responsible. Because that's the magic in AA. That is the recovery process. That's what makes me free. That's what puts me in a place where, where I'm on a spiritual plane. All right, so I'm going to end with a story. I've had 3 sponsors in my life. I had Fish Food Phil for 3 years. I had Good Stuff Gary for about 25. And now I've got Cowboy Brad as a sponsor. Now this guy Brad, some of these guys know who I'm talking about. This guy Brad showed up in a meeting in northern New Jersey wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots. Just it's the wrong town, for something like that. You know what I mean? And so I knew he had something going on. And he got up and he shared his story, and he shared a spiritual story. And I picked up on the fact that there was something really deep going on with this guy. Like this guy was coming from a different spiritual perspective. I was, and I recognized the fact that I could learn some stuff from this guy, right? So a couple of months go by, and Good Stuff Gary had moved away. So I asked him to sponsor me, and he's been sponsoring me for about 4 years now, 3 or 4 years. And he comes from a place in Southern California. There was a group of people in the 70s and 80s that were part of AA, but they were also part of real deep religious, spiritual studies. Chuck Chamberlain was in this group, right? But there was a bunch of them, and they were going to these real modern type church of the science of the mind. They were going all this stuff. And they were studying Krishnamurti, and they were studying Vernon Howard, and they were going to all these workshops and stuff. And you can hear this stuff in like Chuck's talks. Chuck didn't get that stuff from AA, you know what I mean? You can hear it in their talks. And Brad came out of that milieu, and that's why I found it attractive, because I found some of these early speakers really transformational. And we started to do some work together. And 2 things I want to tell you about my being sponsored experience in the last couple of years. One of them was, what Brad does is he works with horses. So he's a cowboy, right? I mean, he's been on ranches his whole life working with horses, and he's really good at it. So when some very, very rich and influential people want their horses moved from Montana to Southern California, for the summer or whatever, or for the winter, they trust Brad to do it. So Brad revolves around, a lot of really cool people, working with their horses. But he also works with people from halfway houses and stuff. And what he does is he does this equine therapy thing. I didn't have much, respect for equine therapy until I saw him do it. And what he does is he gives like recovery Zen talks to people when he's doing this therapy. And there'll be people from a halfway house. There'll be like 8 guys from a halfway house, trying to move this horse through a little obstacle course, without touching it. That's the exercise. And the whole time he'll be giving Zen talks. And he'll always say this. He'll go, the horse lives in the present. So a horse is totally aware. A horse is mindful. If a twig cracks over there, the horse will know it. If somebody coughs in the barn, the horse will know it. If a truck is driving up the driveway, a horse will know it. A horse will pick up on you and how, what's going on within you. It's totally in the now. The horse is not pissed off it didn't get enough hay yesterday, and it's not scared that it's not going to get enough hay tomorrow. It's now, and what Brad is trying to teach me is to do a number of exercises that keep me present and mindful and in the now. And he gave me a couple of them, and they're very simple, and I'll share them with you, and then I'll explain to you why they really are Alcoholics Anonymous, or they help with Alcoholics Anonymous. He told me to do 3 things. And, as he told me to do these, I'm always skeptical about everything. That's, just the way I am. I'm open-minded enough now to maybe try something or think that maybe my idea about it might not be right. But I'm like, my default setting is to be skeptical. So he told me, okay, Chris, whenever you're doing something, tell yourself you're doing it. I'm like, excuse me? He goes, yeah. Whenever you're doing something, tell yourself you're doing something. Like right now, I'm speaking on step 8 and 9, at a conference. I'm up at the podium. So tell yourself you're doing it. Will you try that? I go, all right, yeah, okay. And then he said, there's another thing I want you to do. Everything you do, ask God for help. So, if you're going out to your car, God help me, go out to the car. God help me drive down to the convenience store. God help me buy a gallon of milk. I'm like, that's what you want me to do? He goes, yeah, that when you remember, because you're not always going to remember, but when you remember, yeah, do that. And he goes, the last thing I want you to do is whenever you walk out of a building, look up. I'm like, you want me to look up? He goes, yeah, I want you to look up, and I want you to try these things. So let me tell you so this is how simple it is. I believe there's an economy to the spiritual life. I didn't believe that in the beginning. I remember I got myself the Course in Miracles and started to go through. You ever go through the Course in Miracles? It's like 9,000 pages with exercises you're never going to do. So I believe, especially for alcoholics, the spiritual life, has an economy to it. It's not hard. It's not hard. So when I started to do it, let me tell you what my experience was and why I found these 3 things beneficial. Tell yourself what you're doing, ask God for help, and look up. So I'm telling myself what I'm doing all the time, and I'm finding myself more in the present. More in the present. As I keep doing this, I'm more in the now, in the present. And my mind doesn't drift back to the injustices of the 70s. I don't worry about the nuclear holocaust of 10 years from now. I'm like right now. And that's the holy now, right? It was explained. That's where God can be found, in the calendar day. Now, ask God for help with everything that I do. What that did was that brought me into the consciousness of the presence of God. If I'm always asking God for help, I'm in the consciousness of the presence of God. And that's in our big book. That's one of the wonderful promises that's in our book. And then every time I leave a building to look up, what that's done for me is more and more I've become incredibly grateful to be a biological being having a spiritual experience on this wonderful little globe called Earth. And I look up and I see the clouds, or I see the mountains, or I see the trees. And once more, I'm convinced that I am in God's cathedral. I believe He made Earth for us to enjoy. And I'm incredibly grateful now. Now, where I was prior to a recovery experience was suicidal ideation coupled with psychotic behavioral disorder. You know what I mean? And today I can be in the consciousness of the presence of God with an unbelievable gratitude that I've been given this opportunity to experience a life on this planet. And folks, I am enjoying every minute of it. And I want to thank Raquel again. I want to thank Roger I want to thank Jimmy. I want to thank Peter. They're real good friends of mine. What a great day this has been. Thank you.
We're just going to finish soon.